Hello everybody and welcome back to another chess video, and today we're looking at the Petrov Defense, which is a pretty equal and pretty josh game for both sides, as you will see in a second. And so it starts off pawn e4, pawn e5, knight f3, and then knight f6. As you can see, black copying what white does. So we're going to look at three common moves you'll see from white. Most commonly they'll take the pawn on e5, but we're going to first look at knight c3. Now from here, you can just follow up with knight c6, and this is actually the 4 knights game. Just starts off differently. If you don't know what the 4 knights game is, I will leave a link in the description. It's pretty basic, pretty drawish for both sides. Definitely not bad to play. You may also see black leave the board with 3 knights and bring out bishop to b4. From here, white can take, and just to give a little bit of insight, after black castles, white brings the bishop out. Black brings the rook to e8, and now the knight can actually move to d3, as you can see, attacking the bishop. And so after the bishop takes, the pawn can take, and as you can see, it wasn't a worry that the knight was actually blocking the pawn from coming out, and is actually now on the c file, which is perfectly okay. Black will continue with the taking, the pawn on e4, and as you can see, it's pretty equal on both sides. Black just simply doesn't have the pawn out. Meanwhile, white hasn't castled yet. They could probably castle queenside or kingside to their decision what they want to do, especially since the double pawns are on the c file. You might want to castle queenside. So it's definitely not a bad variation for either side. Now, instead of knight c3, you may also see pawn d4. From here, you can actually take either pawn. I personally suggest taking the pawn on e4. If you do take the pawn on d4, then white will continue with e5, and I just don't like playing from this position. You can definitely play it, it's definitely okay. It's just I don't prefer playing from here. So if you do take with the knight on e4, white will bring their bishop out, to d3, attacking the knight on e4. So most logical move will obviously be d5, activating a pawn, being able to bring your light squared bishop now that was on c8, and protecting the knight. Seems like a good move. White can actually now take the pawn on e5, as you can see. And as you can see from here, this is actually a very symmetrical game. The only difference is white has a bishop out, but it's actually black to move. So it's pretty symmetrical, pretty drawish. I think it's like 0.18 for white, which is like obviously basically a draw. But not too much opportunity to go around. You could try threatening the f2 or the f7 square, but definitely not too exciting, but not too boring either. So now we're going to continue with the main variation where white will take on e5. From here, it's actually a mistake if black immediately takes on e4, and the reason for that is once white plays queen e2, black will play queen e7, and white will take queen e4. Now, one thing I've seen a lot is people try their hardest to protect their knight, because after something like d6, they just want to protect this knight. It's absolutely okay to lose the knight. You're not going to be able to protect it. You'll just simply follow up with a move like pawn d4, and after both pawns take, you're now up a pawn. Not to mention both of your bishops are ready to go. Meanwhile, black's bishop is blocked on f8, so it's definitely not bad. Just don't worry too much about trying to protect the knight, because I've seen that happen so many times where black will play like that, and then they'll end up winning just because white doesn't know how to play. So, yeah. You may also, so that's why you're almost always going to see pawn d6 being played. And one quick thing I want to mention, if white takes, this is actually called like the Cochrane Gambit, I believe. And it's a pretty interesting gambit. We may make a video on it later. But for the time being, we're going to continue with the thing you're going to see like 90% of the time or 95% of the time. With the main line, white will continue moving their way back. From here, black can now take without worry. And from here, there's a few options that white will play. I'm just going to mention all of them, just things you'll see pretty common. First thing is if they play pawn d3, that's actually fine. Just move the knight back, and it is perfectly okay to play from here. As you can see, once again, exactly the same position, white to move, and it is just exactly the same. You may also see queen e2, especially at lower levels. They just haven't seen the Petrov Defense. They think they can somehow pin your knight. it is perfectly okay to play from here. You'll just play queen to e7. Most likely they'll play d3. That's what you'll see 90% of the time. And it is perfectly okay to bring the knight out. Now if you play this variation for white, I suggest bishop e3. It's pretty okay for both sides, pretty equal. But if you do take right here, once the bishop takes, this is actually, as you can see, the same position, but now black is actually a move ahead with the bishop already on e7. So this is perfectly okay to play for black. You're actually now ahead in a move, so it's pretty nice indeed. Now I'm going to go back here. More and more commonly you're going to see knight to c3, and from here you can just simply take the knight, and from white you have two options here. I personally suggest taking with the d pawn, but you can take with the b pawn, and you can see the opportunities on the board right now. Now you can actually play pawn d4 with the support of c3. You can bring the bishop out. You can bring the other bishop out once you play d4. You're going to castle kingside, obviously, because you don't want to castle onto the open b file, and it's pretty okay. However, if you take with the d pawn, as you'll see in a second, now you have the opportunity to castle queenside with the protection of the two c pawns. Both bishops are already ready to go. You can just bring the queen out one, and it is pretty okay to play from here. Black, as you can see, it's definitely not bad. I mean, you do have this d6 pawn, which is kind of annoying, but you can always clear that with playing d5 later on. Now we're going to continue with the main line, which will be pawn d4. From here, black's going to follow pawn d5, most logical move. And from here, white will play bishop d3, putting a little bit of pressure on the knight on e4. From here, you will actually see two moves. If they try to pull the Marshall's Gambit, you'll see something like bishop d6, which we'll get to in a bit. However, you're most likely going to see knight c6, continuing with the main line. From here, white will castle. Black will bring their bishop out, preparing to castle. White will actually play c4, and black will actually bring their knight out, attacking the bishop on d3. Now from here, you'll see two variations. I'm going to mention of both. You may see white immediately taking the pawn on d5. This happens, and just take the knight. White takes the knight, and black takes the pawn. And I think this is actually, it says on like computer leading for white, especially after a move like rook e1. And something like bishop f5 to protect the knight. But I personally prefer it for black just because you have the bishop pair. You have the option on castling on both sides. So if you want to play an aggressive game, then you can castle queenside, or if you want to play casual, you can castle on the king side. So I personally prefer this for black. However, if you prefer this for white, then you can play it like this. However, you may also see, instead of taking the pawn, white choosing to bring the bishop back, so they don't want to trade the knight for the bishop. From here, black will castle, and now something like a3 to push the knight away. And as you can see, once again, it's pretty equal for both sides. Nothing too exciting, nothing that can really change the game. Now, really quickly, we're gonna look at the Marshall trap, which derives from the Petrov Defense, and basically, instead of playing the knight to c6, black's going to continue with bringing their bishop to d6. And so from here, white will castle, most logical move. Black will castle as well. And now c4, you'll see this a lot of times, c4 trying to break up the middle. From here, you will see the bishop come out to g4, and obviously this is a free pawn on d5. And so, as you can see, black's really trying to get the Marshall's Gambit or Marshall's trap to work, sorry, because if it doesn't work, black's going to be down a pawn. So black's going to continue with f5 to protect the knight on e4. And from here, what you should play as white is, if you get into this position, just play knight c3. And this is an absolutely okay position. You can bring your bishop out, try to trade knights. You're obviously ahead a pawn. They actually don't have a central pawn. They don't have a d or e pawn. Meanwhile, you have two d pawns right here that you can try to hold on, or you can try to sacrifice to make something out of. So it's definitely a great position to play from white's perspective. However, do not play the move rook d1, or e1, sorry. Now, this looks like a perfectly okay move for white. It seems like, okay, you're putting pressure on the knight here. You get the open file on the e file. Seems like an absolutely great move for white, except you have just fallen into the Marshall's trap. Now, well, black can actually take on h2. Obviously, they can't take with the knight, otherwise the queen will be taken. So once the king takes, Now the knight's going to take the f2 pawn, obviously attacking both the bishop and the queen, so the queen has to stay near the bishop so they don't lose the bishop, so it may be like queen e2. From here, black's going to take the bishop. After queen takes, you can actually see that the only thing protecting the queen from coming to h4 and forking the rook and the king is the fact that there is this one sole knight, sorry, on the f3 square, and this allows the black squared bishop to now take on f3, and from here, once white takes, then black now has permission to play queen h4, and then it doesn't matter what white plays, black will now take on e1, and you can see this is winning for black in both material and position. You can just simply see that it is an absolutely, like, white's whole king side is absolutely destroyed. It's completely, like, exploded almost. The only thing protection is this one queen, this one pawn. That's it. Meanwhile, black is ahead in material, and it should be quite an easy game for black. So make sure you don't fall for it if you're playing black. If you want to play it as, don't fall for it if you're playing as white. And if you're playing as black, I personally don't suggest playing this, because if it doesn't work, then you're in a pretty tight game and it's going to be pretty annoying. But if you're playing with a friend or something like that, then it could be pretty interesting to try. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, a like would be greatly appreciated. And thank you. Peace out.